Hey there, I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to throw this out there. I have a channel over on YouTube, Life as a ... which basically hosts highlights from these audio conversations that I have with these great guests. They typically run 10 to 15 minutes, and they're there to kind of present a different vantage point. You know, for people that aren't into audio, aren't into podcasts, but are still looking for career advice, ideas, help, all that great stuff, send them over to YouTube. Like I said, Life as a ... And if you do get over there, I would love that like or subscribe. I mean, it's the best way to let that algorithm know that the content is worth sharing and should be out there. So anyway, I do thank you for letting me plug this a little bit, but I think it's about time to get into today's episode. I'd like to open things up today by throwing a few words at you. Are you ready? All right, here goes. Human breast milk, Parkinson's, autism, gut microbiota, corporate law, biotech. Yeah, you can see how it all connects up, right? Now, I won't judge you if you're struggling to make sense of it all. To be honest, it took me a few moments to wrap my head around what my next guest does when initially reading up on him. But rest assured, though, it'll all come together once you meet Alex Martinez, this incredible healthcare innovator and industry leader. And he's the founder and CEO of a company called Intrinsic Medicine that is poised to do some pretty special things within the world of drug and medicine. And in this talk, you're going to learn all about his work, how he manages the professional and personal challenges associated with bringing new cutting-edge drugs to market. Plus, you'll hear insights on things like what it was like to be oh so close to an IPO, only to have it fall through at the last minute due to a sudden market fluctuation. You'll also hear his take on the notion of synchronicity as it relates to his entrepreneurial journey leading up to one of his drugs being approved for a phase 2 trial in Australia. I mean, all up, this conversation is utterly fascinating, and it provides a real dynamic look into the world of career and business progression. So anyone with an interest in that and or health sciences will benefit greatly from listening to Alex. Well, I think it's about time to jump into things here, so let me more formally introduce Alex to you, and we can get started. Alex Martinez, CEO and co-founder of Intrinsic Medicine, is a patient, entrepreneur, business advisor, and healthcare industry leader committed to transforming how gut-brain immune axis, or GIBA, disorders are diagnosed and treated. Driven to lead positive change within the healthcare industry, Alex co-founded Intrinsic Medicine, aiming to leverage human milk biology to transform diseases caused by immune and microbiome dysregulation, including Parkinson's disease, Juvenile Idiopathic Arthritis, IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, Autism Spectrum Disorder, and other GIBA disorders. Now, in addition to his work with Intrinsic Medicine, Alex is working with emerging women and minority-led healthcare startups. And this includes his role as business advisor for women's pain management solution Oncove Health and serving as a limited partner and advisor for Coyote Ventures, a femtech venture fund focusing on women's health. Now, Alex is also a business advisor for Thrive Healthcare, a platform technology that turns common spaces in managed residential facilities into on-demand community health and wellness hubs. In a previous life, Alex was the Director, Corporate Development of Ionis Pharmaceuticals and Associate Attorney at Wilson Sonsini. He received his Juris Doctor from the University of Michigan Law School and his Bachelor of Arts in Health and Societies, Public Health concentration from the University of Pennsylvania. So with all of this noted, I'd like to welcome you to my conversation with Alex Martinez.
Yeah, so welcome to the program. How are you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing well, Christopher. How about yourself?
Really good. As we were just speaking off air, I mean, I've been excited for this talk for a while. It kind of represents this opportunity to dive into a world that I know absolutely nothing about, or at least prior to doing some research on it all. So yeah, I couldn't be more thrilled to share this conversation with listeners and expose them to it all too. I do have this first segment lined up. It's something called Coloring Wikipedia. As my listeners know, it's a segment where I just read off a definition of something related to what the guest is all about. And unfortunately, Wikipedia didn't have anything for the term I was after, which is gut-brain axis. So in lieu, I am using a definition from a website called BioTuesdays, a website dedicated to covering healthcare companies and their stories. So I'm going to read this off, and then maybe afterwards you could comment. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. So here we go. Gut-brain axis. The gut-immune-brain axis, or GIBA, is a complex system whereby the brain modulates gut function through the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and the autonomic nervous system. In turn, gut microbiota modulate the central nervous system by the enteric nervous system, vagus nerve, circulatory system, and immune system. Diseases and disorders linked to the dysregulated GIBA include autoimmune arthritis, Parkinson's disease, autism, inflammatory bowel disease, and even cancer. A bit of a mouthful there, and admittedly, it kind of comes across as a bit technical to those outside of the health sciences. So maybe first off, you could kind of break this down for us in simpler terms.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the way to think about it more simplistically, because essentially what we're covering here is the human body.
Yeah.
And it's understanding how the human body, how different components work as a system on a system level, and how different diseases or conditions that we think about as discrete, specific diseases are actually different manifestations of the same type of dysregulation of a system. And so the system that we're talking about is comprised of the gut. And so this is the microbiome. A lot of people have heard about these. So these are outside organisms living in our gut, directly communicating with our body within our gut gastrointestinal system. And about 70% of our immune cells are also in the gut, right? So the immune cells, so think about it, this is a border crossing, basically.
Yeah.
And so this is a border, and it opens for most people 3 times a day, right?
Mm-hmm,
And so that's where you have these primary immune cells. And what's really important is that this system, it has to talk to the commander, right? The central nervous system. It has its own network of communication. That's the enteric nervous system. It's the nervous system in the gut. So everything's coordinated along that stretch of border, but then it's also communicating, hey, this is what's happening. This is what's coming in to a central command center or central nervous system. And that's kind of really what this system is. From the central command, you can give orders that change what happens in the gut and how the immune system responds.
Okay.
And then vice versa. So it's a very bidirectional system. So hope that was a
Yeah, definitely. I think it breaks it down in simpler terms for us. And, it sounds absolutely fascinating. And we are just speaking off air. Like, this is a fairly new domain, I understand, in terms of study, right?
Yeah. It sometimes astonishes me that it is, but I'll take it. I think we forgot about it for a while. Ancient people did understand this. But what happened is, I think a lot of the current pharmaceutical industry took a mechanical reductionist approach to human biology, viewing us more as a mechanical system like a car,
Okay.
using the car analogy. And that doesn't work, right? Because that's linear.
Mm.
And it doesn't encompass for something like the microbiome that really only got on the radars of most people in the past 10 years. Most scientists, it's not widespread clinical practice. And all of a sudden, people are saying, wait a second, we have an outside community inside our bodies that has more genetic information that has literally more cells, more actual organisms than our actual body. So what are we?
It's mind-blowing is what it is.
It is. And so you have to think about, you say, what is this thing? What is the human body? What is the human organism?
Yeah.
It's a superorganism.
Mm-hmm.
It's an ecology. And so the way to really think about, okay, where we are, why are we in ill health? We can actually look outside and we can see direct examples. When we disrupt our ecologies, we see the environmental issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're fractal of that, right? We're an ecology just like that. So all of a sudden you can think about yourself as a natural system.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Like I said, digging this conversation right out of the gate here. But also, I think it might be an opportune time to learn a little bit more about your company, Intrinsic Medicine. I did mention it off the top here, but maybe you could share with listeners a little bit more about what you guys do.
Thank you for the opportunity. So intrinsic medicine, like definitely is, like my passion company. I think it's a culmination of a lot of different things for me. And what we're doing is we're developing new therapeutics for these, gut immune brain axis conditions. But we wanted to do things differently than how they're done. And our opportunity was, I wanted to start with something with compounds that truly were, safe, right? That was the highest bar because we didn't want anything that could limit the application in the most vulnerable people that actually need it.
Mm-hmm.
Question is, where am I going to find safe yet like very biologically active compounds? And so we were looking in early life. I said, okay, AI is not mature enough yet. So what am I going to use? I'm going to use something different. I'm going to use evolutionary intelligence. And I'm going to create a search and eval lens where I look for compounds that appear in early life that don't appear in other places.
Mm-hmm.
And so we found this, and what it represents, these are sugars. They're called oligosaccharides, and they actually naturally occur in human breast milk. But what kind of amplified my scrutiny said, wait, we need to take a look at these outside of this context, is that these oligosaccharides, these sugars in milk, in human milk, they're non-nutritional.
Hmm.
A baby can't break them down for energy, for caloric energy.
Hmm.
So why are they here? Why are they so
Yeah.
abundant?
Right. Right.
And they're 5 to 15 grams per liter in
Huh.
human milk.
Wow.
So after fat and lactose,
Yeah.
which are nutritional, these are the third largest solid component, non-nutritional.
Hmm.
So they're important.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we've realized is that this is nature's pharmacopoeia, it's nature's drugs that a mother can use to directly communicate with the microbiome
Mm.
and her baby's somatic cells, almost like using them as like training wheels
Okay.
for the maturation, almost like enabling the foundational terraforming of a baby's gut, feeding the colonization of its microbiome, because these oligosaccharides, while we can't digest them, guess what? The microbes we want in our gut that are associated with human health,
Yeah.
they can
Huh.
preferentially. And then these compounds also talk to immune cells. They talk to somatic cells, cells of the body, muscle, bone, like
Yeah.
brain cells, nervous system. And so we look at it and we're like, okay, this is amazing. It's amazing biology. They clearly help babies. There's a lot of data showing that they're safe in human beings, infants and adults. And let's see if they could solve some of the bigger problems we have in chronic disease. And so we have been approved in Australia to start dosing with our lead compound, which is the most abundant of these sugars. It's a synthetically produced but natural identical form. And we've been approved to start dosing patients with Parkinson's disease,
Hmm.
phase 2 clinical program.
Wow. Yeah. Exciting, no doubt. This is an area, as we just mentioned, that you guys are kind of breaking into. You're exploring it further and discovering what some of these possibilities are. Like, how long have you been involved in this process from the time of, I don't know, maybe kind of thinking about this or hypothesizing about it to the point at which what you just mentioned?
Like that's like going back to probably when I was like 3 years old, like earliest memories type thing. Cause I always had a deep love for nature that I would like literally like camouflage myself and just sit by like streams and stuff and
Mm-hmm.
watch wildlife for, tens of hours at a time. And so I really fell in love with the elegance of nature. And so that always kind of struck with me. But I mean, I never actually, like, I have very limited scientific background. I literally have a single sophomore year college level introductory biology class, right?
Get out of
I'm,
here.
I'm a yeah, I'm a corporate lawyer, So I think this is truly the culmination of a diverse set of career experience that I was searching, I was seeking for meaning, inspired by some sort of calling to have a big impact on human health, but it was meandering, right? It was like studying public health. It was then going to law school to become a healthcare attorney and realizing that, oh my gosh, the practice of health law is actually like perpetuating dysfunction in this system. So entrepreneurship is the way, and going to Silicon Valley and practicing as a venture capital lawyer and being like, this is boring and I'm killing myself working 100 hours a week and I'm not doing the fun stuff. I'm not innovating. I'm not finding the patterns and figuring out how to move them forward. And then from there, I started a couple companies and then really had a unique opportunity to move on to the biotechnology side. And that was in 2011, right? That was a weird opportunity because it was for a position I was so completely unqualified for. And at that point, my first startup had not gone well. And this is like 2008, like is when I started my first, not that exactly the best time to be doing this.
Right, right.
A great time for growth though, right? And like, there's no experience trying to do something that would be difficult in a good time and doing it in the worst time, right? And so, that didn't advance, but it was a great. I mean, it was a really cool opportunity. It was a digital health company before digital health was the thing it is. So you're probably seeing a theme. I start stuff before here.
Yeah. I'm picking up on like a lot of different interests, and maybe like there's this feeling out period. I speak with so many different people on this program where these pathways are never linear, right? It's so rare that they are, but oftentimes it's like these people who have an interest here, they have an interest here, and they're trying to figure out, I think at least is my hypothesis, they're trying to figure out how to bring it all together into something that sort of encapsulates all of it. And it takes time. It takes time. You try this out. Okay, well, I'm checking this box and this box, but there's still something missing. They move on to something else. Okay, this checks off this box, but now I'm missing this one. And then eventually, well, oftentimes, at least in this program, people do end up finding it. Others don't perhaps, or they're still searching for it. But I think that sort of represents that pathway in terms of, maybe what you're explaining there.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, right? It's like anytime you feel like drawn to something, you feel like that intrinsic energy flowing, you like explore it. Like that's a module. And you're like, okay, let me find the parameters of this thing. And you'll probably find some things you don't like about it. And then I'm like, okay, learn this. I like this stuff or that. Or I want to, figure out the other components. And then you go off and do that. And then eventually you have this portfolio of pieces and you say, wait, can I assemble something with this?
Exactly. Yeah, right? I think it's a great way of putting it, no doubt. We have this other quick question too, in terms of some of your interests here. Outside of, what you're doing with Intrinsic Medicine, you also are involved in some activities relating to emerging women, minority-led healthcare startups. And I'd be curious, about like the interest there, like what pulls you in that direction? And then secondly, how do you find the time for managing all of this?
I definitely am like an underdog. I don't have like sponsorship. I was like kind of the first check-in, and it's always been like a journey supported with some wonderful people, right? And what I realized is it was the people that I surrounded with that, I was loyal to, that we just respected each other and honored each other. It's the team that carries you through. And especially if you're like starting something and leading something and inspiring other people, it's how you come through from them, to them, how they'll show up. And it's just been an absolute blessing, the type of people that have come to support the core team, ranging from investors to my co-founder, to my teammates, the other executives. And so I just wanted to offer that, like while I'm doing. I didn't want to be one of these people that said, let me just focus on myself. And when I'm a billionaire and I have all the time, then I'm going to do my volunteering thing. I'm going to be like, hey, guess what? I'm incrementally ahead of you. I'm still dodging bullets. And you know what? I want to make your life a little bit easier. And maybe why hoard this knowledge in real time when there's immediate knowledge transfer opportunities? Your second question, right? It's how do you do this? And so what everyone needs to do is figure out their energetic portfolio, right? Say, I have this much energy. What's my allocation of that energy, right? Where do I want to apply it, right? And you also want to be a balanced human being. I have a 3-year-old, I have a family. Like I want to be a good dad. I want to be a good husband. I have like a lot of nieces and nephews. I need to give them, the opportunities and my time and stuff like that. And so I look at my time as a portfolio, and then I say like, okay, this is where I'm going to allocate things. And honestly, like I'm working on actually making family more balanced. I feel like that one's the easiest one to get compressed. That's part of I think it's part of our social stuff, but I think that's changing, which is good. But then there are like other things, like for example, I don't watch sports, I don't watch TV, I don't consume media. And wow, like when you do time audits on yourself and you do
Yeah.
energy audits,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, you can do a lot, right? Like if you excise these things that just are not good for you, or keep you trapped in the dopamine loop.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of just prioritizing, right? The things that are meaningful to you, the things that give you pleasure and joy, and just going with that, really, right? And then being aware of what could potentially trip you up.
Awareness and intentionality, right? And if you do that, you can manage through. And that's why then you also understand that no's are a gift as much as yeses, right? They're a gift to yourself. They're also a gift to the other person, right? Because in the interest of mutual respect, you don't want to take on anything that you can't do. And I'd say that was one of the most special lessons I learned, was no's are good. And so with the companies I mentor or I advise, it's part of them are actually like where there's a learning opportunity, right? Because I always want to be
Hmm.
learning things I'm interested in. So imagine if you have experience and you're able to broker that to get paid in equity in a mission you believe in with some super smart person that's going to literally teach you on like the science and stuff while you help them, like, yeah, I can help them navigate like corporate law, complex partnerships, just all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I can alleviate that, liberate their energy towards what matters to them. And then that shines on me. And it like just I learn from it and I become smarter and
Yeah.
better. And again, it's an ecological approach.
Yeah. I'm sort of picking up on that. Like the way you're sort of interpreting the world is kind of a mirror reflection of the things that you're studying within your own company, I think, within the human body. And it's really quite fascinating. And I do have a question here. Maybe we could shift over into this Q&A discovery. I've got some questions lined up here. But getting back to, I guess, your background in terms of, as you'd mentioned, not the deepest educational base within health sciences, you'd already mentioned, and yet here you have this company and you're doing these amazing things. You have some breakthroughs along the way, coming about right now. So I'm curious about how you went about bringing that all together, building a team, health science professionals, obviously people within biotech, getting them to believe in your mission and what you're all about. Like, how did that kind of come together, at least initially?
I mean, the way it came is I had an opportunity to work at a NASDAQ listed public biotech company that was doing genetic medicines. I think I alluded to it in an earlier
Yeah.
story. It's like I entered biotech in 2011, grossly unqualified, right? I applied for the job to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And general counsel, who's now my friend, was like, called me up and he was like, hey, we're not going to give you the job. Like, because he was like, we can tell you don't really want to be a lawyer. You just want a job. And then he said, hey, if you're open to it, the business guys have had a position open for a year. You're completely unqualified. They want a PhD with 15 years of, pharmaceutical biotech experience. You have none of this. Would you be open to hearing them out? And I said, sure, this is interesting, because those guys had met me during the interview process, because they would have been like a internal client of mine in a lawyer role. And so we talked and they were like, hey, would you be interested in this? Outline it. I was like, yeah, that sounds like really cool. And they're like, okay, so we got to just manage this one aspect, which is your resume relative to the job description. And so I was like, hey, how about I do a project for your, like, the CEO of the company, COO of the company,
Yeah.
right? But what would this role actually do? Like, let me show what I think I could do.
Hmm.
And I did it. So don't be afraid to be autodidactic. Never tell yourself no. Allow someone else to tell you no. And so you're always find a way to say like, oh yeah, I don't have that. Well, let me try. And the worst place we could be is it's not a fit.
Yeah.
Then that served as a platform where, I'm in this role. I basically built a competitive intelligence market research function for a company that's spending like $250 million in R&D. So then I became like a strategy person on every single scientific program, like ranging from like early stage research to like drugs that are like well in clinic on their way. And each one was for like different disease. There were like 40 of them. It was a huge pipeline. And I was like, oh, cool. I got in the ticket. I got the entry ticket. How do I stay? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, learning on my own has worked. And so then I just literally just started like reading, and I have like, what is it? I have it right here. It's right up here. Molecular and cell biology for dummies, right?
Okay. There you go.
So there you go. These dummies books, they work.
Yeah.
That and then going to primary sources. And so I've probably read 100,000 peer-reviewed scientific publications in my career. And then like literally in real time, I'm like teaching. I have the textbooks. I have the For Dummies opening. And what's most important is the litmus test is not a certification. It's sitting down at a table with scientists, with physicians, and creating value.
Yeah.
Right. And then so I was able to build my confidence in this, build organizational credibility, and then it led to new opportunities. And next thing they're like, hey, okay, you're in charge of business development for this. You can handle this. You can work up. And so it became pretty cool because then I was given opportunities that no one else could. I essentially became an internal management consultant, right? So then I had to work on the most important things. And, what that then does is when you want to start something, and my co-founder also was somebody similar that could not stay within his narrow responsibilities. He's a medicinal chemist turned patent lawyer, turned clinical scientist, who then was given a chance to run regulatory affairs for the entire company.
Wow.
And so we're sitting there and we're like, we can do a lot of things, and we've proven our ability to do it. We're complementary. And then by kind of having that little bit of magic, you can go out and do stuff. And then our team actually came through, like, for example, my chief medical officer, my co-founder reached out to him, and that guy was like, oh, are these guys crazy? And then he asked a former colleague of ours.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy was like, oh no, those are two of the best people. And that was a big loss to the company when they left. Here he is. And then he's gotten to know it. And then he's seen us do the same thing, right? So it's all about building credibility, understanding what they're interested in, what they want to get out of it, and saying like, you're part of this, right? Treating people with respect, saying you're part of this. Let's define this together. Let's define what success looks like together. And that includes how we operate on a daily basis. It's like being a human being and saying the legal fiction, oftentimes, like everyone's like, oh, the company, the brand, the mission, the organization. No. It's the people that are deciding to work together and who say, this is how we're going to work together. We want to have fun. We want to do important things. And we want to work with each other.
Well, what strikes me in listening to all of this is like what an unorthodox kind of approach, or how it all kind of came together. And also too, I mean, it strikes me as that, maybe at least initially some of your weaknesses in going into all of this through time, through a lot of diligence, effort, led by passion, led by curiosity, ultimately became your strengths. Like I'm guessing here that people that have this strong background in health sciences went through it, educationally speaking, at least, go through it in a particular manner in which they kind of come out the other end seeing things fairly similarly. But maybe somebody like yourself who went about it a completely different way, didn't have that initial background in it, a lot of self-study, you discovered things on your own in a different way, in a different manner. And that in itself kind of gave you a new perspective on things, and maybe allows you to examine a problem, examine an opportunity from a different vantage point, if this makes sense. I'm guessing that probably played a big part in all of this, and maybe what led you into what you're doing right now, ultimately.
I think you're spot on, Christopher. Like the ultimate arbitrage is taking pattern recognition from another industry, another vantage point, and then putting it into a place where people's noses are like here.
Yeah.
Right?
There it is. Yeah.
Right, and it's like, that's what science is. Everyone's staring through a microscope, a super narrow domain. And here I am. I'm a public health guy. I'm a sociologist, right? I'm looking at satellite level, perspective. So yeah, you put it really well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. I think that's great insight for any listener as well to be taking that on. Well, I think one, it's inspirational, and then two, it's just a lot of great knowledge there. I think an application possibilities for people and whatever they're doing or whatever they might like to do. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that too. And this other question though, getting back to your present day work and what you're doing and leading this company, Intrinsic Medicine, I'm guessing that you're probably getting tugged in a few different ways. One on the pure science-based discovery aims within your company, but then also the financial and business side of things. There could be friction at different points here where maybe the science side of you wants to continue on down this path, but then you have the business side, which is saying like, hey, we need results. We need to find out what's going on here within this quarter. How do you reconcile those differences, those challenges in leading a company such as yours?
Well, I think the most important one is it's a really important question because I think that's also where a lot of pharma kind of has lost its way. Earnings should not dictate science that's intended to help people, right? That's sort of antithetical to the system, right? Which is supposed to be non-biased, right? It's actually imparting, I think it imparts bias all the way down to source, all the way down to research levels. We can track that. So I think the important thing that we've done is and this is kind of how we foundationally built the company, which is like around the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. 20% of efforts actually result in 80% of the results. And then even that last 20%, it still follows the same rules. So, you can do 24% of the efforts and get 98% of the results. And so I saw that so clear from my vantage point in the previous biotech employer I worked at. And I was like, the thing that made us go from, a $600 million company to a $12 billion company, like that was like a couple things. And we were working on like a million other things. And so that we embedded into the like foundational DNA of what we were doing. And then even as two people, we came up with a culture statement talking about that. That's how we want to work, right? So if people look at my calendar, they'd be like, wow, you actually have a lot of open space. Like I thought CEOs are like, oh, you're supposed to have your 4 a.m. morning routine and then do all this other stuff. And I was like, no, my job is to make correct decisions the vast amount of time. And that does not mean busy work is not productive, right? I say really only hyper focus. I only entertain things that actually move, and that's how you do it is with focus, and then you obtain leverage by having a domain expert that you can trust. Right? We're a super small team,
Mm-hmm.
but like with 4 people, and then a whole constellation of external collaborators, we're able to do those domains, and I can say like I trust you to advance this. You pull me in and help me prioritize it, right? You give me all the variables I need to do my prioritization. And I think the biggest thing is just to be time protective.
Yeah, setting those boundaries and being clear in terms of, I guess, how you've structured the company and what you're looking to do, and being clear with perhaps investors or some of these, outside sources, that maybe want things to go at a different pace, perhaps, and managing expectation in terms of some of those things, I'm guessing.
Exactly. It's like hiking, right? The terrain changes, the conditions change, your energy changes, you still want to be moving forward. You just modulate.
I got this other question here too. And again, I mean, being a complete outsider to your world and all that you're involved in, I could still sort of envision, what you're doing, having some of the highest highs and also perhaps at different points, some of the lowest lows. So as a leader and as somebody who's so invested, not only in the company's success, but also like from a passion standpoint, how do you go about regulating your own emotions within all of this?
That's a lovely question because we recognized early on, and it's so well, I mean, when you look at the journey of entrepreneur emotions, it's literally a roller coaster. It's charted.
Yeah.
And so we recognize that like work and personal development, those are just intertwined. Like they have to be, they can't be compartmentalized. And so it's non attachment, it's surrender at the end of the day. I had an IPO that was ready to go, effective. I was in Wall Street, getting ready to meet with, doing my road show. And I was cleared to begin on May 4th of 2022, which is when the Fed raised the interest rates for the first time and the market slid like 15% during just that week, right? Zero IPOs got out to close the IPO window, right? And so I stayed there. It was a valiant effort. We stayed there for like 2 weeks, seeing if we can get this thing done. Financials went stale. And I had to fly back home to, my family, my 2-year-old, and be like, okay, that didn't happen, right? Not only the financial stuff didn't happen, but like that, it's like a big culmination. And what I just recognized was, yeah, this is not my identity. There's not my identity.
Yeah.
If this is what I'm choosing to do at the time point, and if I no longer choose to do it, that's fine. I'm still me. And then I've taken that forward. That's how I regulate it, everything. And I was like, my identity is somebody that gets excited about things, get other people excited about things, does something, gives it, a superhuman shot, and then respects himself, respects others, and just continues to exercise aware and conscious choice.
Yeah, I like that. It's just perspective, right? I mean, life goes on. Returning to your family, seeing your 2-year-old there. I mean, life goes on. They don't know. At least your child doesn't know. You
Exactly.
still got to be dad. You still got to do all these other things. And I think it kind of speaks to this point at different spots along this journey where you need to pull yourself out of the world that you're in, as passionate as you can be about it, and just return to reality. Like I think that's a key part in all of this too. And it's just having that perspective that, life continues on. There's always different opportunities out there, but yeah, it's hard. It's certainly easier said than done, no doubt. and that story, you just shared, I can imagine that being, one of the biggest challenges, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is the last first class ticket I'm going to have for a while. What could have been a defeat, but ultimately there are positives in all of those. And
Yeah.
I think learning that you can always reframe like every experience as a learning or growth opportunity. Those are the
Yeah.
lessons. I wouldn't have had those if that IPO had not. I would have been stuck in the like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. That notion of reframing for sure. And finding value in that situation, as trying as it, seemingly was for you. All right. I have this other question here. And this one is in terms of, the value that you assign to the work that you're part of right now. And like seemingly it wouldn't be that difficult because in what you're offering, like you are providing potential solutions to major health problems for people out there.
yeah.
So the possibility of creating impact on scale, yeah, it seemingly would be fairly simple, at least from an outsider, to attach meaning to what you're doing right now. But all the same, I'd still love to hear it from you.
The cool thing about this, and I think you touched on it when you talk about kind of like the outsider perspective, is this is not my stuff. This is our stuff,
Mm,
right? If
mm,
you go on my website, I say HMOs are our birthright. They are, right? Every human being to have ever existed has been exposed to these, right? These are in maternal circulation when moms are pregnant. They're in the fetal cord blood. So they're literally circulating in our bodies as we're developing. They're surrounding us in the amniotic fluid. And then obviously during breastfeeding, like we're ingesting them. So where I find meaning from this is to find something so beautiful in the natural world that could solve such pressing challenges
mm.
at scale, cheaply, without hurting anyone. And that is a gift. What an honor to just be guiding the process, right? And so I think that's kind of where I find meaning is I'm just trying to nurture something. It's already there, and
Yeah.
I'm just trying to guide it, nurture other people's minds, their awareness to understand this. And part of the effects that I have are if I can get people to think ecologically about themselves, what is that going to do for the planet? What people will then say, okay, ecology, what is that? Yeah, oh wait, that's a society, that's a community. Okay, look at my own community. Maybe I'll think a little bit different there. I'll look at the environment, I'll look at animals and plants as part of my
Hmm.
community to expand from there. So I think there's just layers of meaning, and
Yeah.
they're all fairly harmonized. And I think that's what helps it seem like I do a lot, but there's a lot of leverage built in through that harmonization.
Yeah, I like that. I like that perspective on it all. And it kind of reflects, I think, a lot of this conversation at this point. Getting this impression that a lot of what you do is meaningful in almost everything. And you have these different sort of perspectives on it that aren't just, how do I put this? That aren't just connected to the task at hand. There's this bigger picture constantly in mind, or this bigger awareness for what the ramifications of this action might be down the line, this ecological approach. And I really like that. I think it's a really insightful one. And it's one that I don't often hear. I think it's a helpful one to a lot of people.
Good. Yeah, because look, the journey's hard. And I think one of the interesting things for, I think any entrepreneur, and it's why I'll talk to any entrepreneur, right? And it's because the internal experience is the same. I'm trying to create $100 billion company, but it doesn't matter whether somebody has a sole proprietorship small business. The internal experience emotionally is the same.
Yeah.
And so I give everyone credit for just doing that. That is so you're on a if you're thinking, even if you're thinking entrepreneurially, as long as you're thinking about what unique value do I have, right?
Yeah.
You are on a journey, and it's a journey that is common to us, right? So that we can mutually support us. You have to find meaning because it's hard.
Yeah. There it is. There it is.
That's it. Like, okay, you could either burn yourself out, rely on stimulants, right? Like I don't drink coffee. Find meaning. Well, hey, guess what? You don't need coffee. Weird. So nothing against people that like.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I do have this other segment here, a water cooler story segment. And here I just ask guests to indulge listeners with a story related to their work. So I'm curious what you have for us today, Alex.
I don't know. This is a tough one. But the way I would think about it is like synchronicities are real. And so some people may be familiar with them. I think it was Carl Jung who said like, okay, this synchronicity is something that happens. There's no causality. You don't know why it happened, but there's meaning to it, right? And so I actually think that synchronicity definitely guides entrepreneurship. And so if you open your eyes and you look at them, you can actually potentially see if you're on the right path. And let's talk about my Parkinson's program, if you want to talk about it like,
Sure, yeah.
So we actually, had a couple transactions viewed as major corporate setbacks. We figured out we needed to move from this irritable bowel syndrome, constipation dominant indication that's really expensive to run. We needed to like come up with a more cost effective lead indication. We had been thinking that, many people with Parkinson's often present with constipation earlier, and we're like, okay, maybe that could be an angle. We're exploring that for a bit, and as we looked at it, there wasn't as much data. It was really just like, okay, a lot of these patients have it, like 80% of them have it, but no one's done the work. And we talked to some experts. We looked at some data that was available on our drugs, and we're like, I don't know, this one just like feels right. It definitely like feels right. And we advanced that forward. We designed a clinical study on it. And literally right before we were going to go to the regulatory agencies, this like gigantic study published in the British Medical Journal in 25,000 patients with Parkinson's. And it showed that people that had irritable bowel syndrome, constipation dominant, the thing that we were originally going to study, had over 4 times the odds of developing Parkinson's.
Huh. Wow.
So no one knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Ours was like very speculative, and then all of a sudden,
Boom.
This like massive thing saying like, you are absolutely right, and we're just like saying like, wow, we just like slotted it in.
Yeah.
And within like a matter of like days, the Australian regulators like approved us and said like, go into a phase 2 study testing your drug. And it was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So these things just kind of happen. And it's interesting. And then a thing I never thought about until that moment was the first sick person I ever met was my great grandfather at Parkinson's. And
Hmm.
that was like one of my earliest memories.
No way. Wow. It's mind blowing on a few different levels there. Like, yeah, I was just thinking of those authorities, regulatory authorities must have been just like almost rubber stamping it at that point. And just like the emotion, like getting back to that, that little track we were on in terms of managing emotions and the highs and lows of this journey. Wow. I couldn't imagine that moment right there being, any higher, in terms of what that must have represented for you guys and obviously what it's leading to right now.
Yeah, exactly. Anytime you like when others are like, you're on the path and we want to
Yeah.
support this, it's
Yeah.
just awesome.
It's like rocket fuel for everything else that you're doing
Yeah.
and motivation internally. Yeah. Okay. Well, I do have this last segment here, a crystal ball segment. As the name implies, we're looking towards the future, trends, predictions, so on and so forth. And, we're living in this day and age where technology and technological advancements are certainly coming about. The world of AI, need not say any more about that. But I'd be curious about how all of this change from that perspective is affecting a company like yours or your industry. What are some of the benefits you see of this technology, I don't know, revolution that's underway, and then also some of the adverse impacts perhaps that you're seeing.
It's interesting. I'll start with the adverse effects,
Mm,
and it's distraction, and it's viewing it as a panacea,
mm,
right? There's systemic dysfunctions, right? And so what we know about AI is, right, it's only as good as the data set. Whatever, foundational, algorithms or sort of learning pathways you're putting in it, they take your bias, right? Pharma is a bureaucracy basically, right? And so it is dysfunctional, right? The cost of developing a drug in the past like 10 years have gone from like 1 billion to 3 billion, right? That's rebutting the solo residual, right?
hmm
Which that doesn't make sense, right? So you have massive dysfunction in a system and you think AI is going to solve that? No, it's going to amplify it. And so it's actually something fascinating. I was looking at some companies that are using AI, and what's funny is these are like using AI to do predictive talks on at early stages to figure out if a compound is likely to be toxic and stuff like that. And I actually looked at it and I was like, oh, your technology is going to increase the drug failures like 10, literally 10 times. What's that going to do if it's then feeding into that legacy beast, right?
right,
That
right, right.
that cost just going to go up, keep going up. So the beneficial aspects of AR are people who are thinking differently, who are developing different human systems and using AI to create the leverage to make those a reality, right? So for me, I'm like, hey, guess what? Like, yeah, I'm a user of AI, and I use it to obtain leverage, like on my epidemiology. Like now, I can do prompts, and I can get like epidemiology. I can build models that normally I'd have to hire somebody for 50 or $100,000 and wait, 2 months with a ton of back and forth for me to do. So I think smaller teams, nimble teams, people who are already thinking differently about their human systems and saying, we're going to do something different than the legacy, and that's what's going to create value for humanity, can then use these tools to gain that leverage and advance without that. Same thing, literature searches at scale, right? Like, me reading 100,000 papers, now I could read 1 million papers if I have AI creating synopses of different things that I need at the right time, right? I don't have to wait for a bunch of PhDs to put together a literature review.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that perspective there. I think it comes down to defining how it can be used as a tool. What are the boundaries? What are the guardrails, really? Like, where should we be allowing it to become a tool for us? And maybe where we should be backing off from, positioning it. So, well, I can't believe we've blown through, nearly an hour on this discussion. It feels like we just got started here, and I've enjoyed every second of it, Alex. It's been thoroughly engaging from start to finish, and I can't thank you enough for all your time and insights. It's been a true pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Christopher. Pleasure's all mine. Thanks for having me.
Now, for those interested in learning more about Alex and his work, you can do so via LinkedIn. You can also find him at his company website, Intrinsic Medicine. And for reference, all this information, including links, will be in the show notes. And hey, if you like today's show, please be sure to tell a friend and share to show further support. You can always rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcasts. As I mentioned off the top, head on over to YouTube. I do have that channel over there where you can check out video highlights of the conversation. And if you do make it to that point, please, please, please drop a comment. Better yet, hit that subscribe button. It would mean a lot. And finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as a, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. Until next time, stay curious about life and living.